But the role of the individual, it seems to me, is something that is useful to review and think about a little bit with respect to the situation of the cause as it stands right now. The House of Justice in the 90s, the members addressed themselves to the question of how to perpetuate the entry by troops. And part of that had to do with some honest reckoning by the communities around the world who had been sending in large numbers of existing Baha'is, but they didn't really have a connection with them. So they had numbers reported in the 70s and the 80s and so on, and then they just started chopping them up and said, well, we can't support that, so we will report the honest number that we know we have these people. And of course we know from that, even the numbers of so-called active Baha'is, there's a lot of, if you have 30% of the people on your list active, that's an active community as far as I understand from history, year after year after year. Local level, national level. I remember when I first got to the Holy Land, coming from South America, so I knew a lot about Latin America and the community 5 years. And in the Holy Land, started the whole kind of panorama of the faith all over the world came into. That was a time when this question of paper assemblies was kind of a hot issue. People were saying, well, is this honest, paper assemblies? I mean, these people, we have an assembly and they never meet and they don't know they're an assembly. They don't know what an assembly is and what are we doing? Mr. Simple, one night he came to the Pilgrim House. I was scheduled to be with him with the Pilgrims. And he said, I've had a terrible dream. I said, what was that? And he said, I had a dream we were in a pilgrim talk, and one of the believers asked about the paper assemblies. And he says, without thinking, I said, local or national? Oh, he said that. Well, there was a little of that. There were some fairly sketchy national communities knit together in the course of the end of the Crusade and so on. Everybody was busy learning. Well, the House of Justice felt it needed to direct itself to some consolidation elements, and it proposed a institute. It reiterated, this had been originally in plans of the faith back in the 70s. But then it was more of a building where courses and classes would take place. So that had a kind of dicey career too. It's hard to keep the places up. If the Baha'i communities are not mature enough, when they have a building, then it's all it becomes a burden instead of a help, especially if they're not busy engaged in teaching. So we looked at the question of institutes, and it came up then with a plan to have regular institute activities as one of the core activities of all the local communities everywhere. And of course it had started with devotional meetings, children's classes, and institute courses. It announced that the institute courses should be based on the essential verities of the faith as a means of grounding new believers. It was not intended for non-Baha'is, it was intended for believers who had little or no knowledge of the faith, having been compelled spiritually, emotionally to identify with the cause, but not really having had follow-up. And there were masses like that all over the world that needed attention. It proposed to the National Assemblies that they evolve institute courses of a nature to train the believers in service and action to the faith. But there weren't many of those going on. And after some years, the House of Justice recommended the Ruhi courses. The Ruhi course is not the institute established by the House of Justice. It's the course that's presently the center of the institute life. It isn't that institutes came into being through the institute through Ruhi courses. That's the content. So that may evolve. We don't know how what the future. Also, the House of Justice talked about side courses, side branches of the institute courses. Then it added, as you know, in more recent years, the Junior Youth Initiative, Junior Youth Development Program, and that's become in the collective life of the community has become the focus at the center of everything now, trying to get junior youth groups going, and then through that to reach out to the parents and relatives of the youth that were involved and try to build a community core from that. And I think all of this is still in an early stage of experimentation, and the whole idea of the reflection meeting is that we should consider what's being done and how's it being done. I know the courses that they had in Arizona, they were trying to do junior youth, and they were trying to be very independent of the faith, so to speak. We talk about this, and they'd say, well, where is this from? Well, we're taking the initiative to help junior youth. And so, well, who's behind this? You know, the people were, I mean, you know, Americans are very curious, and they were all after where does it come from? And one old lady finally got bold, and she said, look, why don't we just tell them this is an initiative of the Baha'i community to help junior youth who face this challenge of lack of focus and spirituality in those years, and that's what we're doing. And so they started doing that, and then they found people were offering their children, and things were going ahead very well. And I think that, I don't know if that's prevailing here or not, but the idea of trying to keep the people from knowing it's the Baha'i faith that's behind this, it doesn't produce any particular advantage. And I think we're safer if they understand who we are, you know. So this is in the collective aspect. I don't want to dwell on that too much tonight, because you've got institutions and representatives of institutions and officers of the faith now that are all informed about the protocols and things that are going on. The House of Justice, I think, if I understand correctly what the process was, didn't elaborate much on the role of the individual, because the role of the individual is all laid out in the writings. That's what Baha'u'llah has ordained for us, what Abdullah has elaborated on, what the Guardian has specified for us. All these things are quite clear in the writings. In some places, I think the emphasis on the fact that we were emphasized that the friends were asked to concentrate their energies and time on the content of the plans, of the 5-year plans, successive 5-year plans. That caused some individuals to jump to the conclusion that we mustn't do anything else, that we would be taking away. But you can't take away from what Baha'u'llah said to do. That doesn't work. And where we have done that, there isn't much progress going on. So it's a kind of a rethink that the reason we're following the House of Justice's plan is not because the House of Justice is glorious. It is glorious, but not that. It's that Baha'u'llah has come and he's given his revelation, and we have taken a covenant with him to fulfill his teachings. And one of his teachings is that there's going to be a House of Justice and you should obey it and you should follow it. So all of that comes line by line. Well, what's the covenant we have? What's the role of the individual? You've heard the House of Justice talk about the 3 components of the plans are the individual, the community, and the institutions. And their interactions is things that are being worked out now in the course of the carrying out of the plan, present 5-year plan, which ends in 2021. with the appearance of the schedules of the bicentenary of the birth of Baha'u'llah and the Bab, we had these two special events. And I think, presumption on my part, but I think that we have the new calendar more elaborated because the house wanted these 2 days, which Baha'u'llah said are to be considered one day, the birth of Baha'u'llah and the birth of the Bab. One reality that's represented in two successive manifestations. That's the whole center of our faith and the belief of our faith. And to get them on 2 days, they had to, because that was a command of Baha'u'llah, they knew that element had to be considered. So now we have a very interesting, challenging calendar. We have to keep looking to see what day of the month the feast is, and it isn't as simple as it was before, but it conforms to the reality. We're reaching for that maturity, and we have the twin holy days together on successive days. The interest and excitement of the friends in focusing a bit more on the figure of Baha'u'llah and on his lifetime as part of the bicentenary celebrations, and now so this is this holy year that's presently in course, the year around the anniversary of Baha'u'llah's birth. Then the anniversary of the Bab is coming up. So the House of Justice saw in the Baha'i world a surge of activities of a more public character, attracting more individuals. Friends of the faith brought their friends. The celebrations were quite interesting all over. And that prompted more outpouring about taking advantage of that and teaching the faith. A reminder, which we hadn't heard too much about, the individually teaching. That is, he has a 5-year plan of his own, so to speak, that we are always in mode of trying to find receptive souls and be able to deliver the message to them. The first duty we've assigned, is in the service of the faith is the propagation of the faith. In a tablet cited in the Gleanings, Baha'u'llah says we've laid the duty of teaching, of proclaiming the faith on every soul that recognizes the faith. Proclaim ye the faith to everybody. And then it ends with, it has another phrase that comes just after that. If anyone responds to your call, then teach them the faith. The proclamation is not teaching them the faith. The proclamation is telling them that such a thing exists. Then comes teaching with the content, if somebody's interested. But what we need to do, it seems to me, at the individual level, is learn how to express ourselves in terms of letting people know that either we or the Baha'i around the world, or however it comes out, recognize a new divine messenger from God whose name is Baha'u'llah, and he has produced a faith that's spread around the whole world, the Baha'i faith, and it addresses the needs and crisis that humanity is facing. An expression of guidance on the part of God for our age. And then the person that hears that says, "Oh, I'm so glad you found something you like." Or maybe they say, "That sounds interesting to me. What did you say was that word? That's difficult." And you say Baha'u'llah and Baha'i. I found a letter not too many months ago that I hadn't seen before, and it's the only one that I recall where the Guardian uses the term subconsciousness. And he says that the Baha'is must remember to mention Baha'u'llah's name and Baha'i whenever they have an opportunity to discuss things with people, because that goes into the subconscious and doesn't go away, even though the person apparently has no interest in it at all. After they've heard it, they'll usually hear it again. There's a lady in South Carolina was saying that 3 hits it takes to kind of wake people up. You say, "You've said something to me," and then I read the newspaper and said, They were persecuting Baha'is. Oh, there's that word again. In Iran. Oh, what's that all about? And then my cousin Susie said she lives next door to one of them. Well, what is this thing? Anyway, I better find out what this is. And gradually, the interest or curiosity, at least, attracts the person to trying to find out a bit more. Well, if we're active and we have meetings and we let it be known that these meetings, for a long time, the whole concept of firesides kind of got beaten on. But whenever the House was asked, they said, we've never spoken against firesides. Obviously, how can they do that? The Guardian has established it. They're based on Baha'u'llah's teachings, Abdullah's practices, and so on. And also study classes of the sacred writings, which are an essential part of the community. Those two things were considered as existing there in the covenant we have with Baha'u'llah, and then acceptance of Abdullah and gradually the administrative work. As you know, the Akdas opens with the first duty for everybody is the recognition of the manifestation of God in their time. And then he adds on that has to be followed by an action on the part of the individual to try to conform their lives to the laws and ordinances that Baha'u'llah has ordained. All that takes a little while, even before we find out what they are, and then how do we put them in practice, and then how do we deal with failing in the laws all the time, over and over and over again, till I pray and I ask for forgiveness and I go back, and there it is again, and then I fail again. And Abdullah says this is a successive thing that happens. He told Dr. Getzinger, it's in some notes printed in the Star of the West, that the current challenge. You know what your biggest challenge is, probably. Everybody's got an idea which is the one that's constantly offending me, that I have to overcome, but I don't know, somehow I just don't overcome it. And we keep doing it, we keep trying to it, and we pray and we ask for forgiveness. I'm going to try better, and we try better, but we fail. Till finally, Abdullah says, you get to the stage where you are hopeless about, this is not working. Why can't I just obey such a simple thing as whatever it is that's being told me to do? That the manifestation wants me to do that. And he says, you get desperate, and then you throw yourself on the mercy of God. Oh God, oh Baha'u'llah, if you don't help me, I can't, by my own powers, I'm unable to do that, to take care of this. And I'm now getting hopeless that I can't. And then he says, then God comes to your aid, because that attitude is the one that enables us to surpass all the different tests and difficulties that come at us. So it's a big thing to learn to lean on him rather than try to solve it yourself. Or rather than we try to solve it ourselves. I don't mean yourself. All of us are faced with the same difficulties. On top of that, we have to remember that we're all works in progress. And if we look at our shortcomings, Shoghi Effendi says in a number of letters, you look at your own shortcomings, your own past actions, you will paralyze yourself. All the Baha'is will become silent and inert if they do that. Well, maybe some of you have attained a certain spiritual level that you don't feel that way, but maybe if you feel that way, you should look at it again. Anyway, that is the challenge we have. And without that, we're not going to go forward. Now, you know the urgings of Baha'u'llah in the Kitab-i-Gan for the qualities that the true seeker has to have. And I don't know why. Do we exclude ourselves from being true seekers? Is that something that's different than the laws of the Akdas? It seems to me that these two are all meshed together, you know. We have to be looking at them and thinking about them all the time. Then that passage ends with that paragraph where he says, if you can stir spiritual passion in yourself, if the fire of longing, if the little sparks of vision that you're catching from having tried to obey the teachings, having tried to go forward in the service of the cause. Those things are sparkling there, and you just start telling yourself, look, I don't know, are all the Baha'is selling us short? And I think they don't realize that. They think we have to be busy with social action, that's going to be quite enough, that's what the world needs, is real service, not mystic foolishness. This is the Gone, this is the revelation of Baha'u'llah. What does he say we've been created to do? He does say, carry forward an ever-advancing civilization, yes. Well, what are the prime reasons we've been created?
Know and worship.
To know and worship and love God and serve God. So that has to be the center core of our being. And he says nothing suffices except complete consecration to the will of God, complete sacrifice of our own will and purpose. Well, those are very challenging, unpopular kind of notions at the moment. And yet, until we start doing that and sparking it in each other in greater numbers, I think we're not going to act as a magnet. Baha'u'llah says there's waiting souls, and if we live the Baha'i life, they'll be attracted to us. A community that has the spirit of love and unity that the cause suggests, that Abdullah suggests in the divine plan. Horace Holly said, that the Baha'i unity is not all the Baha'is coming together and deciding that they're going to put up with each other's shortcomings. That's not the Baha'i unity. It's not a bad step, but still. He says what the Baha'i unity is the recognition of the light of God that pulses in our soul, seeing it pulsing in other souls. And that causes a terrific attraction. And overlooking the faults of each other is one of the essences of Baha'i unity. Abdullah says, if you want to fix yourself upon the imperfections of everyone, you will find an abundance of them in every soul. Nobody's looking perfect or acting perfect, especially for the eye that's trying to see the wrongs. It doesn't work. So we have to kind of veil ourselves from the shortcomings. We have to think about the long term. We're all like children in progress. We're growing up and getting more mature. And then reach for the hidden image, that hidden proportion of divine names that's unique in every soul, quite different. To such a degree that Baha'u'llah has said, after he talks about the souls of the believers going to the next world, being ushered into the presence of the manifestations and messengers of God, who will inquire of them that which they have suffered in the path of God. Friends, if it's little suffering, probably be a very short interview. But if you've suffered all your life, you'll have a lot of things to talk about. And I think anybody that consecrates themselves to the service of the cause has lots of things to talk about, because of the challenges of being different from the society around us, and that causes people to attack us. Nobody throws rocks at a tree, at the fruit of a tree, a tree that doesn't have fruit. Nobody throws rocks at that tree, Abdullah says. So you have to be manifesting a whole lot of Baha'i fruit before we're going to have persecution. And Shoghi Effendi said persecution is what will make us grow. Then the cause expands. If we all just accept a kind of half knowledge of things, or we excuse ourselves on the grounds that, that's for special souls or something, how are we going to manage to transform humanity, which it seems to me is the present challenge that we have before us? Awakening masses, beginning this process of what Shoghi Effendi called the spiritualization of the masses, which runs parallel to the development of the lesser peace, which, as the House of Justice has pronounced, a process that's going on in the world, So the individual has to renew their covenant with Baha'u'llah. Stay close to Baha'u'llah. And one of the things I think that's humbugging us a lot is materialism. The Holy Land here, it's in the writings and in the statements of Shoghi Effendi, but he spoke to the pilgrims a lot about materialism being the greatest enemy of the cause. Why would that be the greatest enemy of the cause? Have you thought about that? Does anybody have any ideas why you think materialism might be the greatest enemy of the cause? It's an ism, which is usually a point of focus and adoration of some sort, okay? Putting material things first in our lives is one aspect of it. But I think another important aspect of it is that we attribute from a materialistic science that we have prevailing in the world, we attribute to matter everything, as if matter produces spirit. Abdullah, in the chapter in Some Answer Questions, is quite clear. He says, spirit is primary. And if you look in the writings, I think we can affirm that form, design, identity is all spiritual in character. It impresses itself upon the dust and raises up through its own dynamic influence. And that dynamic influence is the same, he says, it's an emanation that comes from God that contains all of this design and everything in it and impresses itself upon matter. And out come human souls capable of recognizing the source of that design and creation. Abdullah, in a talk in Paris, he says, even if it were not for the power of the Holy Spirit, you would have no possibility of thinking. Thinking is a process which is a gift from the Holy Spirit. Now that puts us a lot closer to it. Who is it that's digesting your dinner, for example? There's such simple things that Shoghi Effendi in a letter says that this negation of God and the Creator and focusing everything on matter, he said it's like the pendulum of a reality has gone too far one way. It says it'll come back now and sweep the other way. And people will scratch their heads about what kind of people were they that denied that there was a creator to creation? Like, is there anything more absurd? And have a good laugh about it. Now people laugh at the ones that say there's a God. You still believe in God. We're just getting over that, and you're still insisting about this spirituality and nonsense, you know? It's corrupting our children. Pretty soon we'll have laws saying it's forbidden to teach your child to pray. I think we'll get to that stage. I mean, they got already in the Soviet Union. They got there for decades, you know? I mean, it's aberrations. It's an ism. I was reading part of a prayer this morning. It says, those who have broken off from their Creator. We are connected with Him, but in belief and in false imagination, we've broken off from Him. We're independent. We can make our own plan. We can plan society. He's made me male or female, but I can change that. Not a popular subject, but I mean, the scriptures are pretty clear about He made them men and women. Whatever else comes with that, I don't know. We are not judging human society. We're not telling them how they should act. But in our own thoughts, we should conform ourselves to divine revelation. And Abdullah says divine science and material science are in full accord. The spiritual teachings of the manifestation and science that conforms to that are in complete accord. There's no difference. We're not going to. We have sciences that are in a stage of development and progress that tell us things that get corrected. The whole paradigm of the scientific community shifts and changes. I'm old enough that in high school they taught us that this Earth is singular in the whole universe. And it's the only sun that has planets is this planet. There's no evidence anywhere. Don't tell me there's anything, because there's no evidence at all that there's planets anywhere else in the universe. Now I don't know, they can't count them. According to what Baha'u'llah said, the fixed stars have planets, and those planets have creatures, and their numbers you cannot ever calculate. Why would we imagine that God would create a garden and not have human flowers grow in it? I mean, what would be the point of planets that have no consciousness of their creator? Stretching myself a little here, I'm going to quote a pilgrim note to you. This was a man who came from Rhodesia to help, came as a pilgrim, and he was the guardian appreciated him and asked him to stay on and deal with government questions and relations to building the shrine of the Bab. And he, Larry Houts was his name, he has written in his notes that the guardian began speaking about this unity and how the ultimate stage of progress on this planet was the unification of the human race, the recognition and wholeness of the human race. After that, he said, there will be interplanetary unities. And after that, interstellar unities. And vast unifications in the spiritual realms as well. Well, pilgrim note, but put it in your place wherever you put pilgrim notes. Because suddenly you have this expanded vision of the universe. Then add to that another pilgrim note. I traveled with the Enoch Olinga. I had the great bounty of traveling with him for 3 months in South America, in all kinds of situations and communities, in the jungles, in the highlands of the Andes, in cities, in universities, radio talks, everything. And in the course of that, we became quite close, because I was his interpreter for everything everybody was saying to him, and I had translated all of his talks into Spanish. And he said, you know, when I was in Haifa, the guardian taught me about all things. He had gone to Haifa. He had already received the title Abu Futu, the father of victories. He was a Ugandan, a tribesman in Uganda who was educated, became a Baha'i of the first wave of Baha'is there. And when they formed the LSA of Kampala, the guardian called on the members of the LSA of Kampala to go forth and open West Africa and other countries to the faith. Brand new Baha'is. And the Nakshavanis drove, I think was 3 of them, in their car from Uganda out to West Africa. And they dropped Enoch Olinga off in the Cameroon, in British Cameroon. And so he became the Knight of Baha'u'llah for British Cameroon. The other 2, Max Kanye-Yerzy and a couple others, they went to other neighboring countries. They all started teaching, they started teaching the faith. The Nakshavanis went back to Kampala. Brand new Baha'is. I mean, year and a half old Baha'is, 2 years old. Incredible. Well, Mr. Olinga attracted in the first year over 100 new believers. And he had such a profound spirit. He told me he kept having dreams and visions while he was there. So wonderful. Anyway, then he went on pilgrimage. And in the course of, when he got there, Shoghi Effendi said, Mr. Olinga is going to stay in the Eastern Pilgrim House. He's from Africa, and he's English speaking, but he's going up there. There were no Eastern pilgrims. He said, I'm sending Lotfullah Hakim to take care of you up there. You'll be in the pilgrim house, you'll be close to the shrines. And it was the custom of the guardian every afternoon to go and visit with the Persian pilgrims, the Eastern pilgrims, and walk with them to the shrines. So here he was with Enoch Olinga alone, walking to the shrines every day. And he said he also invited me to that master's house in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, to come for a couple hours and discuss the teachings. He really took time to. One of the things he told me, he said, more than once I heard Abdullah say that this planet is the hell of the planets, the most backward of all of the set. And he said there's civilizations far, far superior to ours, even on near planets. Pilgrim note, friends. You've got to be careful how you repeat it, but you know, let's wait and see what science tells us. Science will show us the way he also says about that. But you realize then such a basic principle as that religious truth is relative and not absolute has to be understood. It's central Baha'i principle. That along with progressive revelation. What does it mean? It means that this is the day of God, the supreme appearance of the manifestations of God on this planet has now been consummated with the coming of Baha'u'llah. But when you put that into the scheme with the rest of the planets and rest of the stars, it's a relative truth. As exciting and wonderful it is for us, we need to understand it. I don't know. I found that by envisioning that going out and the idea of interstellar. Startling told me one other thing I'll share with you. He said that after we finished the unification here, that we'd be in touch with other planets. And then there would need to be messengers of God to unite us with other planets. And finally there would be a messenger of God who would unite the whole our whole solar system towards the end of our universal cycle. That's 500,000 years. So we're not you have to wait for that one, but we'll be watching from another realm of existence. A realm of existence where we become eternal. What's eternal? It's not eternal from the moment we enter the next world and go on. We're eternal. We enter a realm of eternal understanding. It's interesting. We're not Johnny-come-latelys. We have the possibility of pre-existent, ancient. Possess a pure, kindly, and radiant heart, that thine may be a sovereignty, ancient, imperishable, and everlasting. Ancient means pre-existent. It's the same word philosophically that means he's calling us in the hidden words. Don't you remember that radiant morn when we announced these things to you? That's that part of our nature that's there. But that nature is latent within us. We have to focus on it. We have to develop it. How do we serve and be successful in service to the cause was a question the Guardian addressed over and over again in particularly last 3 years. He addressed it all as ministry. He gave us all the tools and translated the writings that we needed to be successful in spirituality and all. But particularly he was saying that we should concentrate on 4 steps. And that is prayer, meditation, study, and action. That we should pray to grow spiritually, to draw closer to our Maker. We should meditate upon the verses of God which He's revealed for us for that purpose. We should study painstakingly, I think is the word in the Advent, the literature of the faith. We should become knowledgeable of all the literature of the faith. And then we should act. And then we should act. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Shoghi Effendi writes in one of the letters that the House has reproduced in the compilation on deepening. A little is a dangerous thing. It is fully applicable to the teaching work. First stages in teaching, we talk about whatever little thing we know about the faith that we like, and we usually add our own ideas onto it. And the people flee away, and that's the end of that. So we really have to know what we're talking about it as best we can. Of course, that's a moving target also. We little by little we do that, but we never. Shoghi Effendi said there was pilgrims here. He announced to one group. He said there were pilgrims here at last. The previous group. I asked them if they had. If they were studying, if they'd read the Kitab-i-Gan. And he said, I don't mean this as a slight against Americans. He said there was one American gentleman who said, yes, he'd done the Igan. And he said, I didn't say anything, but I'm telling you now, you can't do the Igan. It doesn't finish. It never finishes. You have to keep on doing it over and over again. And all of the writings are that way. Shoghi Effendi gave us certain basic books. I mean, the Gleanings is like a Baha'i Bible. You've heard the Bible, people, they said the friends used to call the Advent the Bible of teaching. But the Bible of the revelation, the Bible of the essential teachings, where Shoghi Effendi's drawn from all these different modes of revelation of Baha'u'llah and put them in one volume. And he said he'd selected them in such a way that they're suitable for the public. There's nothing in there that the public who doesn't know anything about the faith would be too much to see at the beginning, you know. And he tells us in the Advent that we have to painstakingly review all the basic literature of the faith. Now, that doesn't mean that whole book or bookshelf you have of books about the faith now, but rather the writings of Baha'u'llah and of Abdullah and the writings of the Guardian. Those are the things we've got. And when he mentioned, well, what should we study? He would say the Gone, Some Answered Questions, the Gleanings, Prayers and Meditations, and God Passes By. He only wrote one book. We've got lots of books of the Guardian, but he only wrote one book, and that was God Passes By. Otherwise, these are compilations of messages that he sent to national assemblies, national communities, individuals, and so on, that have been placed in a number of volumes, especially a lot of them to the American Baha'i community, which really got the lion's share of the Guardian's guidance. So I don't know, I hope the word got back to that gentleman that he could manage to read the Agon some more after the first reading. So now, I want to ask you a question, but I don't want you to answer it. How long since you last read The Dispensation of Baha'u'llah? The letter the Guardian said contains the essential verities and fundamental truths of the Baha'i faith. And I think, you know, it's been a while since I read it myself, so I'm right there with you. Where do we find that letter, The Dispensation of Baha'u'llah? World Order, the compilation of writings, the World Order of Baha'u'llah, it's embedded there, but it's also published independently. One of the officers of the National Assembly told me, they said in conference they'd asked, two big youth conferences, East and West, they'd asked if, how many of you have read The Advent of Divine Justice? And nobody had, on either coast, had read it, or maybe even, he said, I think they hadn't heard of it. We kind of drifted too far away from this individual responsibility to deepen ourselves in the fundamental verities of the faith and in the essential literature of the cause. And that's what animates us to the point where we can't help. We're full of excitement about it, and we talk to everybody we talk to. Mention somehow, we find ways to relate it to the situations outside. Hopefully not related to politics or political partisan politics in any case, although it's tempting now because we think we can remedy that. As far as I understand, Shoghi Effendi over and over said we are going to build a new world order on the ashes of the old world order. You want to fix it before it burns down? I don't know what's... No? Also, one of the things that sometimes we hear that seems we should be moderate, it seems to me, is that every time we read a prayer or read a verse, that should result in some action. And because of the materialistic view of life prevailing, we think that action has to be social action in the sense of solving people's problems, social problems, or cleaning the park, or doing something tangible that's real, that people can see what we're doing. The greatest act, Baha'u'llah says, that a human being can perform is the praise of God. Well, the very prayer itself is an action already. And then the next most important thing is to share that message with others. Now, Abdullah said we've got civilization, it has two wings, there's a material and spiritual progress. And he said the material progress is getting along by itself. What needs attention now is the spiritual side of civilization. So maybe we shouldn't just discount the idea that this spiritual service, the service that has to result from our study of the writings, from our saying of the obligatory prayers, from our annual fast, all of these things need to result in a more compelling concern about spreading the teachings. I was with the House of Justice, very graciously had a meeting with them a year and a half ago, and mentioned that there's not much fireside movement, and of course they were fully aware of that. They said we've mentioned firesides more often in the last year and a half in our messages than in all the previous 30 years. Of course, in the previous 30 years it was established, so that nobody talked about it, but they are emphasizing that, and the House of Justice, I think you can be sure reviewed, I know they did, the messages that came out of the National Assembly this last year, last February, the December one and the February one. And there they talk about a person being attracted to the cause and learning about the faith enough to become a Baha'i even before hearing about the Institute process, which is such a different idea because the communities have gotten in the habit of saying the proper way for the faith to grow is to take the new people, whoever shows interest, and put them in a book one. And they go there without an overview of the faith. As I say, the House had that not for people that don't know about the faith, but for people who weren't grounded in the faith. They need to be grounded in action. And you have difficulties. You need to be cautious about taking brand new people. They've done book one, you go into book two, and suddenly they're all full of Baha'i responsibilities. So just warn them ahead of time. This is the course that's made to help the Baha'is to understand it. By your taking part in it, you'll get a clear picture of what kind of responsibilities the Baha'is have in their communal relationship with each other and their collective activities. Okay, fair enough. At least it softens it. Otherwise, you see these people, they sometimes are reacting and saying, but I'm not a Baha'i, why are you? I don't have to do this, whatever. So, I think the summary of what I was trying to suggest tonight is that we rethink our relationships over and over again with Baha'u'llah and with this action, which is an action of the soul, which is a breathing of life into the souls of others, Abdullah calls for in the Divine Plan. He doesn't tell us to go distribute pamphlets or leaflets or something. He says breathe life in the souls of others. Then he says, and the poor can't give to the poor. First you have to enrich yourself, which is the whole idea. Baha'u'llah says, before all things, teach yourself. And once you've taught yourself, then your words will take effect in the listeners, in the hearts of the listeners. Well, that's the big challenge we have, and I suppose you're all thinking about it all the time anyway, but some of the places I've been, there were gasps about this thing because they have not been studying the central literature of the faith. They've been doing the Institute courses. But the Institute courses themselves at various stages say you should have a plan for individual study of the basic writings of the faith. It's because this is the mandate that we've been given by the Guardian. Well, happy Rizwan.
Thank you for that.
Most welcome. Yeah. Go and search out this. What are the teachings about prayer? What are the teachings about meditation? What are the requisites of study? And then action. Perseverance in action. Sacrifice in action, that the Guardian says. Persevered was such a theme of the World Crusade, particularly. The hand of the cause, Bill Sears, had an idea for cartooning, got a cartoonist to draw it up, and it was a island out in the sea about the size of this carpet with a palm tree in the middle, coconut palm tree in the middle, and a bedraggled Baha'i couple in rags just pulled a bottle out of the sea, and the message in the bottle, they were reading it, and it said, "Persevere, Shogi." Well, this eventually made its way to the Guardian. They said he was tickled with it himself. People would write and say, "Oh, Shogi Effendi, I've opened this place, but with this job, but now I've lost the job, so I have to leave." He said, "Right, for heaven's sake, change jobs." Simple kinds of, talked about people being willing to lower their standard of living to stay where they had gone to stay. There was a Louise Schreiber, a woman, a short Texan housewife. She looks at all these goals, and most of them are getting filled up, the near ones, the more attractive ones, the islands of the Caribbean and so on. So she chose Equatorial Guinea, which was a Spanish Guinea at that time. An island in the sea and a bit of an enclave in the mainland. And she went there. And she lasted about 2 weeks before they said that whatever she was doing here, she shouldn't be doing, and she was instructed to leave on the first means of transport, which happened to be a boat going south to San Tome and Principe. She became a double knight. She was knight for Spanish Guinea, and then she was knight for San Tome and Principe. And there, somehow, she met somebody from the president's family, and the president's mother became very interested in the faith and knew languages and was able to propagate it amongst the family. So she got quite an interesting attraction there. She caught another boat and went back to the mainland part of this little country was sleepy enough that they didn't have much communication, and she was able to stay there for some time and established a community there in that on the mainland part of what is now Equatorial Guinea. And then she came back. It's amazing things Baha'is did during the crusade. In these Nights of Baha'u'llah, there's a book by Earl Redmond now that's come out, which is a bit of a summary of some of the lives. It's so inspiring, when you think of these people. They really were not, you would say, who you would choose, ideal people to go to these places, And the master said, you should know the language if you're going there. You're going to try to teach somebody, but most all of us went out and we didn't know a word of the languages where we were going.
But to learn them.
At least some, or attract someone who was bilingual enough and get them inspired to do it. That's what I did with Mosquito as a language of the Nicaraguan rainforest. We found a Christian minister who'd become evicted from the church for certain unreputable activities that he had, and he was quite repentant, and he wanted to help. When he heard about the Baha'i teachings, he helped do the translation of the prayers into Mosquito. That was a goal of the World Crusade. The Guardian, I think he looked at the languages in which the Bible had been published, so he knew there had been some initiative to translate by sacred literature into the native languages. And he chose a whole list of languages, both for Africa and for the Americas, for Asia, part of the crusade.
Can you talk about the writings around bringing yourself to account? Because I feel like I've seen it written loads of places, and it's something I try to do, but I feel like I don't quite understand it, like how systematic it should be, like what exactly you're doing. So can you talk about that?
I remember that in the Old Star of the West, there was a paraphrase of something attributed to the Bab, in which he said, each day at the end of the day, you should examine, reflect on your actions of the day, and if you found that you had done something that corresponded to the teachings, something good you'd managed to do, or some nicety you'd shown to somebody, or a smile even, whatever it was, to thank God that you had been confirmed to do that. And then turn it over and ask what you may have done that was short of the goal of the teachings of the faith, and that you'd failed in, and to beg his forgiveness for that, and ask him strength to enable you to do better the next day. And that seems to me is kind of the essence of bring yourself to account each day. You want to see what you did that was you could praise, and what with this praising of our actions, there's some strong stuff in the gleanings. There's in one tablet, Baha'u'llah says, all good comes from God, and all evil comes from your own selves. That means no good comes from anything but God. No good ever comes from a human being. Only evil things come from human beings. If human beings manage to do something good, it's because God is acting through them, because they've submitted themselves and attempted to reflect his qualities. And then it doesn't belong to them, it belongs to God still. So Abdullah says in a startling tablet that I saw when I was leaving the World Center after 37 years serving the World Center. Oh my goodness, 37 years, that's a long time to be serving art. And then I saw this tablet of Abdullah. He says, the service of the friends belongs to God, not to them. So I thought, well, I have to come out and start all over again. Yeah. And anybody thinks they've managed, or they are doing something of service, of some special service to the cause, or they're a great teacher, or whatever they are. This is, he says, then they find themselves swept aside by the currents of the cause, Shoghi Effendi says, and ineffective in what they're doing. So, we're constantly, we've got two big veils that the writings tell us over and over again, keep us from drawing closer to God. And what do we know is drawing closer to God really is drawing closer to Baha'u'llah, because that's the source through which this light of God comes to us. That one is ego, the insistent self-love is the opposite of the love of God. To the degree that we love self, we don't love God. The heart has a single affection. Baha'u'llah says in one of the tablets in the gleanings to Abdul Aziz, he says, since the affections of the heart are one, then the affections got to be centered on God, who desires to be loved alone and above all that is. That's a big challenge too. You say, well, but I have to love my children, I have to love it. All of that, Abdullah says in one of his talks, derives from the love of God. If you've got the love of the manifestation, the love of God is in the center of your being, then that requires you to correctly distribute your affections and love to your family, to your country, to mankind, to children, to animals, to all the different levels we have to do it. But if Abdullah says, and don't ask me where I'll be in trouble, Abdullah says, if the one in a couple, one loves the other more than they love God, it will be the cause of difficulties in the marriage. And how many marriages are coming about because we both love God, so we're getting married to each other? It's no, I have to love you, and you have to love me, and then we can get married. And it doesn't go very far usually. That love, sometimes it consolidates. I think it's a big help when we're Baha'is, because we have marriage prayers and we have things we can think about, but the outside world is, wow, very challenging. When you see the same divorce rate in the inside the faith as outside the faith, and you think, well, maybe we're not thinking these things through too completely. But I think if we love God more than we love our partners, it causes us to love our partner in the appropriate way, in the right way, that helps them and helps us. So bring yourself to account each day. Yes, you can do a weekly summary too.
The best of.
A monthly one, yeah.
Great question.
Now, Baha'u'llah uses the word infidel in a prayer. What does the word infidel really mean?
I think, this is the people that have broken themselves off from God. Infidel is unfaithful. The root of that would be infidelity, unfaithfulness. So it's putting love of self before love of God is diabolical. That's what all this Satan and Satan of self, Satan is the lower self, is when we love what we want to do more than what he wants us to do. And it's always the opposite of what he wants us to do. I don't know, it's a challenge. Heaven is seems to be a very complex and amazing place. I mean, in the sense, everything that's here, he says, is a reflection of something in the heavenly realms. But the complete character of that, he said, it's inappropriate to reveal to us here, because here is the rule of free will. We have to be able to choose. And anything that becomes too bright and too overwhelming compels us rather than allows us to choose. So there's always some doubt concerning it. When you first make a move towards some spiritual action or something, well, is this really necessary? And well, that goes against my desire to do this other thing, and well, look, lots of trouble. Infidels. I think we're living in the most period of the most infidelity in the whole history, recorded history of the human race right now. Broken off from God. I mean, societies. Imagine. And then if religion doesn't stay in its proper seat in the heart, and of course it's been driven out by superstitions and dogmas and all of the things that the clergy have invented to make this religion exclusive to the exclusion of everybody else of the human race. We were talking the other night, the majority of the human race believes in a creator and a mediator between them and the Creator. The majority of the human race, think of it. I mean, that's what the Muslims believe, the Jews believe it, the Christians believe it, the Zoroastrians believe it, the Buddhists believe it, the Hindus believe it. Problem is they don't believe in the relationship that it has with each other. And that's the great gift of Baha'u'llah, is come and solve this whole problem of diversity and division. But we already have a start. I mean, there's a lot of materialism, but mostly, the Guardian said it was born in Europe, raised in America, and exported to the whole world. And there's nothing wrong with riches and material well-being. In fact, it's a requirement of spiritual maturity. You've seen that in the writings? It says once you attain spiritual maturity, you need material means in order to perform good services. So it's not that. It's just getting that between ourselves and the will of Baha'u'llah, the purpose of Baha'u'llah. You have such a diverse community. I mean, of people here in Palo Alto too, to demonstrate this oneness of the human race. It's a marvelous possibility. I'm sure the schools reflect that too. Yes, please.
I feel like the materialism of society as it's intensifying, and there's so many distractions, and there's like, the moral standards seem to be declining, and it's very easy to sort of lose sight of studying and meditating and these things. But as adults, but I especially worry about it for kids and for the junior youth. And I feel like we have these children's classes, we have junior youth groups, but it's once a week. It's like a little, cup full, and there's a tidal wave of materialism hitting them at all the time. So what else do you think we can do to protect them? Because I just worry, like, how are they going to make it through till they're like mature enough to like really themselves know to pray and meditate and study and sort of combat those forces?
I think that you were saying the difficulty for adults to study and things. That's the answer to your question. I think it's that the parents have to be focused on the faith and drawing on this spiritual vision and transforming themselves and speaking about their experiences in that regard with children at the table and whenever they can. First duty is the parents. Before the child goes to children's classes or school even, Abdullah says the parents should be, they're the first educators. The mothers especially, the first educators of the children. The challenge goes right back. Right back to the moms again. Yeah, it's important. It's so important to. We're exploring that area, a class once a week or once a month. It's not going to carry the children through. They begin being, because every day they're with other children with other ideas they're hearing constantly another image of society. And then the school teachers are confirming the materialistic view of society, and science is confirming it. It's really so amazing that any of us make it through.
Isn't it amazing to me, I'm thinking, when Abdullah talked about this, being able to teach our children and ourselves to see God in everything. And I was thinking of our children. I got a 3-month-old baby and we're trying to do childcare, grandchild. And to recognize that, just seeing him as that, a reflection of God in that, and you see the purity of the little child, and you realize that, as he starts to smile and you start to smile, and he smiles and you glow, and that whole, it gives me goosebumps. But then I realize that literally as he gets older and works his way through, that being able to convey to him our own sense of looking at the world and seeing God in virtually everything, I think is not the most. If you can strive to do that, then you will be able to help overcome those kinds of lower nature divisions that we can sometimes do. And I just let that, boy, for this little 3-month-old, I'm thinking, that's, I don't know, that speaks really strongly to, and I guess you look at that and see the good that's in the world.
This is so essential in the teachings of Muhammad. He says, will ye not behold the signs of God in the universe and in your own self? And you have this quote, is it in Seven Valleys, or maybe it's in one of the other writings of Allah, where he quotes the Imam Ali saying that, I see nothing but I see God before it, God within it, and God after it. It's the godly eye that's it's the change in the way we see by growing spiritually, by observing the simplest acts. Allah says these basic laws, don't ever miss the obligatory prayer. Abdullah says 2 excuses for missing obligatory prayer. If you're deadly ill, you can't get off your bed, and you're insane. So if you miss your prayer, which one is it? It's just that kind of sobriety and facing the laws and thinking about them. I get all worked up about this inside because he says, he whose words exceed his deeds, better is death than his life. So far, he's been treating me with some kindness because I go around spouting off all these things.
Pressures.
But if you hear I've woken up dead one morning, don't worry.
So is there any good way to protect like that level of sobriety from, like in your stories earlier, you gave at least 4 examples where the house said something and then the community interpreted it in some like really overzealous way, and then the house is like, what? No, no, no. Do you have insights into why that happens, or like is there a process of how the house's messages are getting digested that like needs improvement, or like?
Well, it's asked us all study their messages, and that I think a lot of that has been done. There's a whole lot more detail than these simple directives that people are saying, you know. There's no sense in reading the verses of God if it doesn't result in action. But presently, we're mostly interpreting that to mean social action. That's not the whole thing. I mean, that's an element of it. Certainly not. Can't deny that, but I don't know why it's this way. Some of the worst of it was America. And the worst of the worst was California for some reason. These things got very, very strongly stated.
I mean, the intention was there to like really strongly follow the laws of the House of Justice or not, and yet.
Yeah.
It wasn't the balance. I think it was just balance between the individual and
Your individual responsibilities, your knowledge of the teachings of Baha'u'llah, then the reflection meetings and all the other things we have to do, I think, fall into the proper perspective.